and welcome to Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Wortmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. On this program, we curate and cultivate conversations pertinent to nation building, but also to families. And so today we will continue our marriage and family series with a third edition focused on building intimacy in marriages. Our panelists for today are all part of the Family and Marriage Department of First Assembly, and we have Reverend Randolph Singh. He's a long-standing member of the FAOG Marriage Department. He ministers to couples, and he also ministers in the Sunday School and Children's Ministry. We have Minister Norma Singh. She's also a Family and Marriage Department member, and together herself and Reverend Singh have been married for 45 years. So I am sure there are lots of experiences that they can share with us. We also have Dr. Marcel Hudson and Deborah Hudson. They are both educators in the professional realm, but they also minister as the leaders of FAOG Parfaith Harmony Satellite, and they have been married for over 28 years. And together they reside in Guyana alongside myself and Kurt, who will be your moderators coming from Geneva, Switzerland. Kurt, I hope you remember how long we've been married, but I do believe this September will be 18 years. Panelists, welcome. As we examine intimacy in marriages, it helps to frame the word's origin as derived from the Latin word intimus, meaning innermost or deepest. There are many definitions for intimacy, but in kingdom language, we like to reflect on one flesh. And so, Reverend Hudson, I want to give you a chance to relax and share with us, is intimacy and one flesh the same? And considering that there are several realms of intimacy, meaning physical, spiritual, emotional, social, and others, give us your reflections on intimacy in the physical sense.
Thank you very much, Siobhan. And I like the question. You know, this morning we had a discussion. I was sitting on the floor in the kitchen. I don't know why I decided to go on the floor, but Deborah was in an elevated position. She was seated on a bar stool in front of the bar, or and so I was on the floor, and I said, you know, we were discussing the topic and the whole issue of intimacy. So I said, how would you define intimacy? And I said, fundamentally, it could be into one another, you know, as persons having a relationship into one another. And then Deborah said, it is into your mate, you know. And I said, wow. And then I realized, you know, how we get concepts are formed. And so, obviously, the concept of one flesh indeed speaks to the whole issue of a deep relationship, because if you are one flesh, it means that the two, as what we see in the word, the two becomes one. And for this reason, a man should leave his father and mother and become, and he should cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So there could be nothing more intimate than a one flesh scenario. And indeed, I noticed that there are different realms that we discussed, and the issue of the physical being intimate physically, I think that is fundamental in the establishment of a marriage. It is important that we have those kinds of physical contact and physical relationship, because and what is important that we talk about from a sexual standpoint is not about an individual satisfying his or herself. Satisfaction must exist on both parties. Both parties must feel good as a result of having a sexual encounter. It's not a rush thing, and I'm happy, and then the other person, just see themselves as a receptacle or as a toy. but um, it involves foreplay. I am what I am. I am never ashamed or afraid to say things, and I guess by now lots of people know me. It involves foreplay. It involves making your partner happy on both sides. You understand me? And you know what is important? Even as you do the research, you recognize that physical intimacy, when it brings about, when it is positive, it brings about happiness. Persons are happy. Pastor Court, I mean, as an old officer, military man, I don't know if you've seen men come to work and whistling. All the time they were disgruntled and aggrieved. And one morning, good morning, sir. Good morning, my brother. How are you, sir? You see, Pastor Court saluting happiness. So some members might say, what happened to boss last night or whatever. But when you have that kind of intimacy, that physical connection with your partner, there's happiness. Stress levels are reduced. That thing takes away, reduces stress levels, and it brings about healing. Healing in relationships, better healing. And behaviors could be healthier behaviors, you could see. And more importantly, we see also research has shown that the lifespan of people tend to live longer when they have this kind of physical contact in the one flesh scenario. I don't want people to run away thinking that I'm saying you're going and sex everybody. But in a one flesh scenario, the lifespan, you know what is when you're into your mate, you have this deep relationship with your partner, and it is reciprocal. You're happy. Your life could be of better quality, and and healing and all the other things that go along with good living as you become physically intimate in the context of one flesh.
Dr. Hudson, I was going to hold on the long life. So, Kurt, I'm serving more notice. I want to live long. Uh, so, Debbie, could you tell us, my sister, what are your reflections on physical intimacy and all the
All right.
other ways in which it shows up in your marriage?
Like Doc would have been saying, um, this morning we had a good laugh indeed about the whole word. And indeed, when you're looking at it, and now that he's speaking, it's even clearer the one flesh and the into, or you're inside your mate. Like I would say, under his skin or under her skin, because intimacy basically has to do with a close familiarity, a friendship. For me, physical intimacy is key. It goes beyond sex. It goes beyond just the touching and the sexual intercourse. But when you have this friendship, you are not on the surface. It's no plastic. It's what you see, what you get. And indeed, it is something that we need to cultivate if our marriages, if our families are going to exist and exist healthy. We have to become more intimate physically. We must be able to trust each other. We must be able to not be afraid to come and share anything and everything with your mate. And that's the physical aspect. I believe that your mate should know you entirely when we talk about physical. Let's say, for example, this could be far fetched. Let's say something happens to either party or a family member, and you have to identify that person. Because of intimacy, it might be or it should be easier for that person to identify someone physically because of that that intimacy, that inside of each other. My husband should be able to look. If you cover my face or my upper torso, must be able to look at my lower part of my body because of intimacy and say, yes, this is my wife. I remember a few years ago, we had played a game at one of those marriage gatherings that we've had. And there was a time when they blindfolded the one partner, and you had to now identify your partner. We couldn't speak, they couldn't see you, they couldn't hear. But from looking or just touching the person, you must be able to say, this is my husband or this is my wife. And that could only happen if we have true intimacy, true connectivity, not plastic, what you see is what you get, not lip service, not, just on the surface. And it's indeed something that we need to rebuild. With all our busy schedule and going after work and all that, we need to rebuild intimacy. This is how we were able to grow, because I think I know my husband so good. When we talking physically, I know how we would move, how we would operate. Yeah, so that's my bit that I want to add, and it goes beyond the sexual intercourse.
Wow, wow. Kurt, I see you nodding, but as I'm hearing the Hudsons, we really want to get to our viewers and even address the cultural issues with us coming from Guyana. That physical intimacy really indeed, and I'm happy you guys pointed out, it goes beyond just sexual intercourse. Intimacy is just being in the same physical space. It's hugging, it's the reactions, it's the smile when he nudges you. It's the holding of hands. And Kurt, we can have a laugh about whether we like the holding of hands or not, because I know you love to do that when we were dating. But I think this is what we wanted to share with the viewers so that they can see there's a wide gamut of physical intimacy. And physical intimacy actually helps us to reconnect. It helps us to reconcile, after you've had an issue. It is not that that should be used as the vehicle, but there is that benefit. But I'll turn to the Sings. And by the way, the Sings actually were some of the Kurt, the counselors when we were doing premarital counseling. So you see, you guys have done well that we have now to celebrate 18 years. So, Reverend Singh, for us, spiritual intimacy is also important. Could you tell us your reflections on that?
Spiritual intimacy. I want to piggyback on what Dr. Hudson mentioned earlier, this oneness. We discussed or we mentioned three types of intimacy. For this to happen, there must be this one flesh. We need to understand this. If there's not that one flesh, we are not going to be connected. It will just be pleasure. It will just be fun. But we're going to be on that. And as I said earlier, for this to happen, for this to be realized, the Bible is clear. The two shall be one. When we're one flesh, we would enjoy intimacy in every area. Spiritual intimacy is just not spending time together as a couple in the Word of God. It is also about learning how to connect with your spouse through faith, how to connect to your spouse through faith. We come back together with that oneness. When we think of oneness, the two shall be one. It means that whatever your spouse is going through, you feel it. If they're happy, you're happy. If they're sad, you're sad. Without this oneness, you cannot enjoy intimacy. I'll give you a good example. One time I remember my wife was ill. I was at work and I got the message. Immediately, I became sick. When I went home, I saw my wife in that condition. I perspired. When my children came home, they asked the question, Daddy, who is sick? Is it mommy or daddy? It's amazing in marriage, we don't understand that oneness, that closeness, that togetherness. And as I said earlier on, if we are not one, if we are not connected, we would not enjoy intimacy. It would just become a pleasure. It would just become a routine. It would just become a habit. And so spiritual intimacy is more than just being connected to your wife, to your spouse, sorry. We have to spend time with each other. We have to understand their belief. We have to understand certain things about them. It's amazing that people are married, they don't understand about their spouse. They don't spend time finding out. I learned some things in marriage that I want to share here quick with this oneness, this one flesh. What you have is not your own anymore. What I have is not my own anymore, it's ours. And this is difficult for some people to understand. The two become one. Your own is my own. Your joy is my joy. Your feeling is my feeling. Your sorrow is my sorrow. We have to get to this place where we would understand that we are one. And when we become so closely connected, when we become like that one, we would enjoy and we would understand what is real intimacy. And so we want to encourage you, force, as especially spouse, understand your spouse. Spend time with your spouse. Find out his or her weaknesses. Find out what they're going through. Spend quality time with them. And so we will be able now to help each other. I want to make this quick. In marriage, being one, identify problems in your marriage. Look for causes in your marriage. What is causing this problem, or what are causing these problems, and then apply the solution. Marriage must be a little heaven on earth. I hope that you understand this and that we will practice this, and so that our marriages will be better. Thank you.
Wow, powerful, powerful reverencing. Norma, tell us what is your take on spiritual intimacy and even dovetail into emotional intimacy, if you may.
Okay, hello everyone. God bless you. This is a topic that is very important for us to look at as couples. Intimacy is only possible in a safe environment. We have got to understand that every one of us has a past. No matter what we do, we all have a past. And when we look at each other under the eyes of intimacy, it helps us to be very observant. You are able to see each other properly, not through other people's eyes, but your eyes. And when you look at each other and you see that there may be what you might term faults and all of that, you don't highlight it. You shouldn't. You observe and you think and you wonder, well, why is this happening? What is happening? And I have found that if you really sit in that quiet moment, in that closeness, you will observe and you will find out that there is something, it could be in the background, that is now surfacing. For me, marriage can bring out the worst in us, but it can also bring out the best. And when we think of the worst, and we know that is a case where we have made a covenant, we ensure that we allow God to help us to fix it. We will be able to deal with each other according to knowledge and to be cognizant of the fact that we are in this for the long haul. There is no giving up. There is no letting up. We have got to learn to be forgiving. We have got to strive to be authentic. Get it done your own way with the help of God. Don't look at others. Don't depend on other people's ideas and advices, but you just do it with the two of you. Let it be a real intimate situation. Act as friends. Make it private. Be in a relaxed atmosphere as much as you could. And you're going to find out how intimate it's going to be with the help of God. God bless you.
You know, Sister Siobhan, I just want to make a quick
Go ahead.
I want to make a quick input here, and I mean this is solid stuff, and I think people really need to hear this. Man is a tripartite being, body, soul, and spirit. I think we attempted to address the body when we talked about the physical, and the spirit. Um, Norman talked about the spirit, and you did say dovetail into the emotional, which is your mind. The heart of man, or it is described as the mind, your will, and your emotion. The soul of man, body, soul, and spirit. You know, I sat in a sociology class in um, 1989, I think, and I did a course called um, Marriage in the Family, or Sociology 208 in those days. And this is a secular professor, and he was talking about the reasons why people get married and so on. And he pointed out three reasons. Of course, there are many reasons, but back then he pointed out three reasons. He said people get married, one, because of what they could get out of the marriage. You know, the person might be rich or whatever, so you go into this relationship. It's such a relationship you could never really enjoy true intimacy, in my view, because the motive for marriage was wrong. I'm not saying that you have to go and marry, look for somebody who's poor and they have nothing. I'm saying I'm making a point here. So he said marriage, people get into marriage because of what they could get out of it. Then he said people marry because of society demands that it is time for you. And you see that. Some people run to get married because they said, I'm getting old every day. So they pick anything that passes along, which is dangerous. And then, strangely enough, this secular professor said, and people get married because they recognize marriage is ordained by God. And he was of the view that those who understood that it was ordained by God, those marriages last longer. But the thing is, when I got involved in this relationship, I recognized that God ordained it. So you know what? I'm ashamed to make God's hand fall. Because if He said that I should get into this thing, I cannot afford now to go outside of what He has ordained. And so God, as Norma said, God is my restrainer. Because you understand that you have a spiritual relationship with God. And if you have that spiritual relationship upward, it will affect everything that is on your level and even below. On your level and even below. So your wife, you are the level with your wife, that relationship affects with God, impacts positively. So Deborah's been able to see me for 28 years without me giving her any difficulty. Not because of her, she's being beautiful or some great thing or that she's intellectual, but because I recognize that when I stood before man and God, for better, for worse, sickness and health, until death we part. Now, if you have those things at the back of your mind, those things are restrainers for you to start talking about divorce. And so I know, and I am not stupid to the fact that real tough things could happen in a family that will cause persons to go in a different direction. I'm not ignorant or I'm not oblivious to that, because there are times when, based upon certain things, yes, you might need to move apart. But the whole idea of being married to someone is that you want to fight for your marriage with the last drop of your blood. I'm not talking about shedding anybody blood. I'm speaking figuratively. So you fight for your marriage, you fight for your relationship because you understand that it is something ordained by God. Sorry to take up so much time.
No, this is awesome stuff. Kurt, I want to hand over to you for any other questions you have for the panelists.
Thank you, Siobhan. And before I go to the question, my co-moderator, let me just add a few to emotional. What am I looking? What's the word am I looking
Intimacy.
for? Emotional intimacy. You see, you know the word. You can read my mind. Emotional intimacy. That's it. So thank you for being that, for being my excellent partner and co-host. Emotional intimacy has to do with, among other things, but being vulnerable. Be vulnerable and trust how we feel about or towards each other. That is what emotional intimacy, in my humble opinion, has to do with. How do we feel? How do we feel validated? How do I validate you as my wife? How do you validate your husband? Um, how do you relate to each other? How do you care about each other? How do you help each other? How do you listen to each other? Do you even listen to each other? All of this has to do with our emotions, because your spouse could be speaking to you and you were saying, I don't know, you were zoned out, you're watching television, or you think there's something else better to do than whatever he or she is trying to tell you. And it affects the emotions. Once it affects the emotions, how we relate to each other, how much we can trust each other, how vulnerable we can be with each other, the physical and the spiritual is affected. As you heard before, the physical and spiritual are very important. So we need to listen to each other. Are we interested in each other enough that we would understand our each other's hobbies, even though we don't like it, but we will make an effort to go to support. All of this has to do with emotions. And when persons can feel trusted, when they can feel welcome, when they can feel vulnerable, because none of us likes to be vulnerable at any time. But this is where our emotional safety comes in. So I would leave that out there. We need to spend time with each other. We can't have a busy schedule, so busy that we can't share anymore, that we can't speak anymore. It affects our emotional intimacy, and that affects our physical intimacy, and it affects our spiritual intimacy with each other and with God. So these are things I would like to posit out there. Find times. I think Reverend Singh mentioned that. Find time to spend with each other, quality time. So my question to the other panelists, my other hat I'm putting on now as co-moderator, um, how important is it that our children see us being intimate, physical, spiritual, and emotional? How we heard before from, and this is the all panelists. In the interest of time, you have like 2 minutes. Let's be concise and clear. We heard before from Dr. Hudson and Deborah how Yeshua was involved in the conversation with physical intimacy. That is very important. We didn't plan it, it just came out like that. So I'm happy that they mentioned it. So the question now to all of us, including Siobhan, how important is it that our children see us being intimate, sticking to the three framework we used before: emotional, physical, and spiritual? Anyone can go for us quickly, no names, and let's go.
Could I start?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I just love being with children. And I believe that it is very important for children to see us being intimate. I had some experiences during the COVID with the children, and I realized that they are so connected to each other when they are in those kinds of environments that we could not imagine. I'll give you some examples. We had some sessions where we had to do assessments with them, and therefore we had to work it out with them doing the assessment one at a time. Means that the other children were blocked out. My grandson was with me, and I had a difficulty for him to do the assessment at the beginning because he wanted to know where the other children had gone, what was really going on. And this was not only that single thing that happened with him, other children experienced that. Also, those children were so happy to get back into school when it was time. I remember they came and they had to get their photos taken for graduation. You would believe that these children never missed a beat with each other. They were just running and playing and jumping and hugging and so on. And I realized that children, this means a whole lot to them, this intimacy. And if we practice that at home with the children, I think it will make a difference. I think we as parents, we have failed in some measure in this area because the children do not see us spending enough time together and sitting and talking. And at times we have the opportunity to allow them into our conversations. Our conversations must be so open and clear that they can be a part of it. So I believe that the children have got to see this kind of situation because it helps them.
Deborah, Reverend, or
Hi,
Doc?
yeah, Yeshua, Yeshua has seen everything. um, so this morning, as we were talking, I even turned to him and asked him, what is his understanding of intimacy? And he told us, he said, it's not, you know, lip service, it's real and it's deep. It's not surface level. Those were his words. And so we didn't ask him, but he volunteered more information and he said, y'all have an intimate relationship. So I said, you think so? For me, to be quite frank, the children must not only see these lovey-doveys, they must see when we may have the disagreements, when we may have um, hard conversations, but then at the end of it, what they must see was the solution, how mommy and daddy were able to come together and solve whatever the discussion, whatever the disagreement, whatever the disconnect was. They must be able to be witness to even that. They have some relationships where children just see the holding hands and the cuddling and the rubbing the backs. But children are very spiritual beings. And I don't take that for granted, like Norma said earlier. Those children pick up what adults might think that they're not transmitting. Children can detect when one party is unhappy, when either mommy is not right, when daddy is not right, they can sense it. So I want to encourage us, our viewers, our listeners, be real before your children. Of course, being sensitive of what you are making them to be real with or what they're exposed to, because some children can carry that with them. But at the same time, they must understand that intimacy is not just us holding hands and me rubbing daddy's head and he rubbing my back or my feet or whatever. We have disagreements. We have areas where we may not agree, but then we come together, and this is what the solution is to this challenge that we would have had. And the next day, they must see a real step into what they know mommy and daddy to be like. So a lot of the fake, we must drop that in our homes. Let us be real. Let us be real. For me, I physically, mentally, I believe intimacy is something that we need to talk more about, because if physically you're ill, it affects the partner's mental, it affects the partner's emotion, the things that the one person might have been able to do, they can't do that anymore. So intimacy, this one flesh, is so valid, is so important. If we are really going to make our vows that we take before God and man a reality and make it last and make it work, we have to be intimate, one flesh with each other. So allow your children to see the real naked truth.
Thank you, Deborah. How old is Yeshua?
13 going on 14.
Excellent. Thank you. I hand over to Siobhan as you answer and wrap up. Thank you.
Well, what an interesting discussion, panelists. I want to encourage our viewers to stay tuned and join again. But as we wrap up, I heard so many themes. I heard one flesh, I heard innermost, I heard deep, I heard from Minister from Norma around being safe, feeling safe, and being in a safe space. And so these are all elements. But as I wrap up, there are a few things I want to reflect on. Matthew 19 and around verse 6, if we're reading from the Message version, it says, because God created this organic union of the two sexes, no one should desecrate his art by cutting them apart. And so, as I leave you, viewers, I want to encourage you, if we're to cultivate intimacy in our marriages, we need to be intentional. Deborah did say we need to do the work. So, be intentional. We need to communicate. This is another theme that we heard from the panelists. Communication we cannot get emotional intimacy without communication. And this includes being vulnerable, breaking through the fear and resistance that one party may have around sharing where you came from, how you feel when your spouse does something or doesn't do something. And of course, there must be trust, there must be empathy, and there must be that creation of a safe space where we can talk about things, because intimacy is not organic. Intimacy comes from hard work. And so, as we wrap up, the time seems to have gone so quickly. I want to thank our panelists for all of these insights. I want to thank you, the viewers, for staying tuned in. And if you have a young person who's contemplating marriage or who may be struggling, we've all struggled and overcome. I want to encourage you to have them view this program and every other part in the series. Thank you all. You can join us again for the next episode on the 2nd of July at 5 p.m. Please keep in touch with us at faogw.org and our YouTube channel, Choices Global. I am Siobhan Corbin, along with my lovely husband, Kurt Corbin, your moderators for today, encouraging you to write positive stories around your marriages and families. This is Choices Global.